Obviously, my panel here is with me now. This inflation that he's talking about, this uncertainty is plaguing voters all across the United States. And there's a new poll from NPR out today, Alice, that says 39% of voters say inflation is their biggest economic concern, over wages, over labor shortages, over unemployment. And so how do you think that is affecting these poll numbers that we are seeing of President Biden's also drop?
It has a tremendous impact. That's why we're seeing his poll numbers at 42% approval rating. That's horrible. And you have to go back to when we first started seeing signs of inflation. The White House, the administration told us this is just transitory, it's temporary, it will be short-lived. But now we're seeing, even from liberal economists, anticipating this will last well into 2022. So the longer this inflation and these high prices hit Americans, the more harmful it will be, not just for this president, but for the administration and Democrats. We saw in Virginia in the governor's race, pocketbook issues were the #1 concern for Virginia voters. And as the prices continue to go up and inflation continues to haunt people, it is not good news for Biden.
But Francesca, you cover the White House, and you see that there are these numbers, these price increases are obviously not good for the White House, but there are other strong signs in the economy. Like when you look at the jobless claims, the unemployment claims, what is with the disconnect? What does the White House believe is with the disconnect between some of the strong signs but also such pessimism over how people view the economy generally?
Well, and I asked White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki about this yesterday. Why, when they keep hammering these things in about the wages and the shelves being chalked, are you seeing such a disconnect in the polling? And Americans do have this view that the economy is not getting better. And she essentially said that they just think they need to draw a stronger contrast here, and they need to keep putting the president out there and administration officials out there in order to convince Americans that it's actually better than their perception of the economy is.
Which is obviously a tough sell for them, as we're seeing that over the last several months. Bill, you're quoted in an interesting piece in The Atlantic today that says that if Biden essentially wants to raise his popularity, which clearly the White House is working on doing, that he needs a villain, an enemy to unite the American people against. And James Carville, a Democratic strategist, is quoted as saying, as of now, the White House does not have good storytellers, and good stories need villains. Do you agree with that? What kind of villain do you think that they are saying that the White House needs?
Yeah, I'm not sure that was the thesis of the piece. I wasn't inventing villains, but one just footnote on Alice's point. So in Virginia, where I live, I know some Democrats who, in real time, evaluated all the Youngkin ads, which were the most effective. They just ran them through focus groups. The one that was the most, by quite a bit, most effective Youngkin ad was, he is going to cut the grocery tax in Virginia. I've lived in Virginia a long time. There is a sales tax, and I guess it applies to groceries, and that does show how all the other stuff, critical race theory, all these other issues that allegedly were so strong, it was cutting the grocery tax, because people are so sensitive to inflation.
And suspending the gas tax as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, that is just brings home the point that you can have good low unemployment numbers, you get no credit, and inflation takes off. And people are worried about inflation. Just one more second on that. For this reason, this is why it is more worrisome than just, it's temporary, 6%, whatever. Because if it keeps going and the Fed has to tighten, then you can get in the worst of both worlds. Then you can get unemployment starts to go up again, interest rates start to go up, and you still have some inflation. And that's the real nightmare for the Biden White House going to 2022. And as for a villain, I don't know.
Yeah, this idea of that he needs something to unite people against. Isn't inflation a villain enough?
But he doesn't. They can't affect that very short term. I think they're crazy not to try to take more credit for what the progress that's been made on COVID and to keep hammering that, and frankly to criticize Republicans who have not helped get more people vaccinated, get more people boosted, get more kids vaccinated. We are turning the corner on that, despite the sort of upsurge you mentioned earlier in the last month or so. But people are vaccinated, and fewer people are dying, and those who are dying, unfortunately, the unvaccinated. And I think, Biden just should say a year ago, think where we were a year ago, think where we were today. That took a lot of work. Give a little credit to President Trump for getting the thing going 2 years ago, a year and a half ago at the beginning of the pandemic. But people are taking that good news for granted, and then they're focusing on the bad news of inflation.
Yeah, but they're going to the grocery store and they're paying so much more. And I think the president has tried to make that argument about look what happened a year ago and look what's happening now.
And they're also at the gas station. They're paying a lot more for a gallon of gas. And I think the problem is, to the tone of that piece, it's not about this president finding a villain. His biggest problem and the person he needs to focus on is himself and the policies that he is implementing. So often, as I've said for years, Republicans have focused on policy over persona, and Democrats have focused on persona over policy, and that has created a very problematic blind spot with regard to an agenda that will lift all Americans up, especially on
policy. I'm going to let Jackie talk in 1 second. But that Thanksgiving dinner that cost 40 cents more per person this year, there were no Thanksgiving dinners a year ago. Why? Because the pandemic was raging and there was no vaccine. Shouldn't people have that in mind as they complain about things costing, 40 cents more this year?
Well, one of the things the White House has tried, you could hear it in Biden's speeches, they've tried to be sensitive to, is they want to acknowledge the fact that people know that they're paying more. I mean, yes, gas prices were lower last year because no one could go anywhere, right. But that doesn't change the fact that if you're trying to go see your family this year, it costs a lot of money, and you don't have as much money because things cost more across the board. So while the White House is trying to tout some of the things they're doing to reduce belie inflation, they also are having to acknowledge the fact that people out there are hurting. Because they can't just plow through it and pretend that they live in a different reality.
Right, and that's kind of been this message that you've seen President Biden taking
Yeah.
lately. Basically, I feel your pain. But Jackie, I want to get your take on something else, some speculation about 2024, because it's never too soon to start talking about the next election, apparently. There's a new piece in Politico today that says the Buttigieg presidential buzz has penetrated the White House. And it has a quote saying, "I'd say the other thing that I'm really enjoying about this job," from the transportation secretary, "although it's very demanding and obviously requiring a lot, is that this is the least I have had to think about campaigns and elections in about a decade," and that's a very good thing. Do you really think that Pete Buttigieg, the transportation secretary, is not thinking about an upcoming election potentially?
I mean, he's got a lot of people around him to do that for him, and the rivalry that's playing out even on the staff level right now is just a glimpse of what we're going to see over the next 3 years, whether or not, and I know the Biden infrastructure around him has said that he's definitely running again. Of course, they have to say that. If you don't say you're not, if he throws it in right now, no one's going to listen to him. He's not going to be able to get anything done. So that absolutely makes sense, but that is not going to stop these very, very ambitious people and the people around them from marshaling, what they can, just in case the time does come for them to have to mount another campaign. They don't want to be caught flat-footed.
And the White House has said President Biden is running for re-election, but obviously I think the natural question and the natural person that people would look to is the vice president. And so what are your sources telling you about how her staff feels about all of this talk surrounding the transportation secretary?
Well, it's a difficult line for the vice president to walk in any scenario because she has to do a good job at her job in order to get that next job if he doesn't run in 2024, if she decides to run at some other point. But then you also have a transportation secretary who is out there putting his name on all these projects and getting to be seen out there with other people. So, it's a difficult situation to be in for her.
And she's got all the hardest stuff, too. I mean, her portfolio is pretty tough.
It is pretty tough. Thank you so much, for being here the day before Thanksgiving. I really appreciate it. Up next, this